Okay, so we're going to be looking at more word problems and word problems specifically that are similar to ones on the test. And so in the first example, we see Isabel rented a bike from Danny's Bikes. It cost $12 plus $6 per hour. If Isabel paid $30, how many hours did she rent the bike? Now remember, when we were talking about linear word problems, we said we can write these linear word problems in these forms: y equals mx plus b, or if our initial value is being subtracted from, that b value, if it's being subtracted from, we may write it in this form, okay, where we subtract that rate from the b, okay? But the important thing is we have to determine our m and b so that we can write our equation. So going back to the problem, we see that Isabel rented a bike from Danny's Bikes. It initially cost $12 plus an additional $6 per hour. So remember that per is key, that this is going to be our rate m, and this is what it initially cost to rent the bike, which was $12. So we know our b and our m here for our equation. Okay, and in fact, since it's being added here, we know we're going to be dealing with this guy here. Okay, so we have y is equal to my m, which is 6, okay, $6 per hour plus 12. Okay, in this case, x is represented by the total number of hours. Okay, so x is our total number of hours, okay, that she's renting the bike, and y is the total amount she paid. Okay, but the key is here, notice if Isabella paid 30, so now they're telling us she paid 30, how many hours did she rent the bike? Okay, so they're telling us she paid 30. Well, we know y is the total amount she paid, that's the total, so I can replace my y here with 30. Okay, so we know she paid $30. What we want to find is x, the total number of hours that she rented that bike. Okay, so this turns into a two-step equation. Remember, we have to apply our inverse operations and get x by itself. We go to the number furthest away from x on the same side. So if I have plus 12, what's the inverse operation? Minus 12, and I have to do that to both sides. Okay, so we have 30 minus 12. Okay, we have 30 minus 12, and we get our 18. There we go. Oops. 18. There we go. And that's equal to our 6x, and of course our inverse operations cancel out. Now remember, when we have a number next to a variable, that implies multiplication. So my inverse operation is division, and then I get my inverse to cancel out. 18 divided by 3, or excuse me, 18 divided by 6 is 3, and we get 3 is equal to x. Okay, so remember, x is the total number of hours. So how many hours did she rent the bike? She rented the bike for 3 hours. Okay, so that'd be my answer to number 1. Number 2, you had $32 to spend on 7 apples. After buying them, you had 18. How much did each apple cost? So again, we're going to be dealing with that y equals mx plus b, but we got to determine our m and our b, okay? So you had $32. That's the initial value that we started with. That's our b. So we started with $32. We know that's our b. And then after buying them, we had 18 left over, okay? Now ask yourself, is 18 how much you're going to be spending per apple? No. So in this situation, they don't actually tell us our m, they tell us the total. That's going to be our y, okay? So when we're looking at the equation y equals mx plus b, they're telling us that the total that we end up with here at the end after she spent that money is going to be 18, and we started with 32. Now ask yourself, do we want y equals mx plus b, or are we starting with a total that's being subtracted from? Well, we're starting with 32, we're subtracting what I spend on my apples, and I end up with 18, okay? So we want to use this guy. So kind of backtracking here, we're actually going to use this equation right here, okay? So I'm starting with $32, and I'm subtracting however much I spend per apple, but how many apples do I buy? 7. So this is one of those weird situations where they don't give us M, but they tell us we buy 7 apples, and at the end of all that, we ended with $18. Okay, so just to backtrack here, this one was a little bit of a weird situation. We started with 32. We're buying so much per apple, but they don't tell us how much it is per apple. They just tell us we buy 7 apples, and then we end up with $18 in our pocket. Okay, so now this is a weird situation where we actually have to find M, but we can do that here. Let's just go ahead and go erase all these lines right here and go back to what we started with, 18 minus M times 7. Okay, and we got to get M by itself. Well, notice I want to work away from the variable on the same side, and I need to get rid of this 32 to the other side. Well, 32 is positive, so how do I move a positive number? I subtract. So I'm going to subtract 32 to the other side. But notice I have different sign. So what do I do when I have different sign? I subtract and keep the sign of the larger. So what's 32 minus 18? 14. And which one has the larger sign? Or which one is the larger value? 32, and it's negative. So I get a negative 14 is equal to, inverses cancel out, a negative M times 7. Well, now I have M times 7, so how do I get rid of it? Well, I have to divide out this 7, okay? But notice, it's not just a 7. There's a negative in front of M, correct? So we don't want to just divide out the 7. We also want to divide out this negative. A good way to think of this is this and this are the same, okay? And negative M times 7, isn't that the same thing as a negative 7 times M? Well, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to divide out a negative 7 from both sides. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say, is that we can divide out a negative 7 here just as if we would divide out a negative 7 here. Okay, so we're going to divide out a negative 7 from both sides, and I get a negative 14 divided by a negative 7. When I have a negative divided by a negative, I get a positive, and in this case, writing it over here, I get 2 is equal to M. Okay, so we divided by our negative 7, okay? Remember, we can treat this guy over here like it's a negative 7, inverses cancel out, and I'm left with 2. Well, what does that mean? Well, if M is the rate, the price per apple, then that means it costs $2 per apple. So how much did each apple cost? Each apple costs $2. Okay, each apple costs $2. Okay, so just to backtrack here, we started with 32. We subtracted out how much it was per apple, and we bought 7 apples, set equal to how much we ended up with after we left the register. So after we paid, we had $18 left over. Okay, so we discovered that by getting M by itself, M is equal to 2. In other words, each apple cost $2. Okay. Now on number 3 here, it says on Tuesday, Sam bought 10 hats. On Wednesday, half of all of his hats were destroyed. On Thursday, there were only 17 left. Sam said that the equation x plus 10 over 2 equals 17 represents the equation to find the number of hats he had on Monday. Jera said he was incorrect, that x over 2 plus 10 equals 17 is the equation he should use to find the number of hats he had on Monday. Who is correct? Okay, well, let's just kind of break this down. So we want to know, going back here, is that he should, which equation he should use to find the number of hats he had on Monday. Okay, so going back to Monday. Well, we know on Tuesday he bought 10. Do we know how much he had on Monday? No. So if we don't know what a value is, we can let that be X, right? Well, then going into Tuesday, he bought 10. Well, if you buy 10, isn't that adding 10 more to what we had? Well, yeah. Okay, so I'm adding 10 to the amount that we didn't know that he had, correct? And then on Wednesday, so we took care of Tuesday, then on Wednesday, half of all his hats were destroyed, okay? So on Monday, he had X, an unknown amount. On Tuesday, we added 10 more. On Wednesday, he lost half of it. Well, how can I represent half of what we don't know here? Well, anything that we take half of is essentially dividing by 2, right? So if I take all of this amount and divide by 2, that would give me half of x plus 10, okay? So with that in mind, on Wednesday, he has half of his hats were destroyed. So if I take that x plus 10 from Tuesday divided by 2, now I'm at a half. Then on Thursday, we know he had 17 left. Okay, so all of this, by Thursday, we know we have 17 hats left. Okay, so looking at this, we could use this to solve how many hats he had on Monday. So what Sam said Sam said that this equation, x plus 10 divided by 2 equals 17, represents the equation to find the number of hats he had on Monday, which is exactly what we said here. X would be Monday. Okay, X was Monday. By Tuesday, we added 10 more. And then on Wednesday, we divided everything by 2 because he only had half of it. Okay, so if we use this equation here, we know by Thursday he had 17. That would be able to help us to solve what he had on Monday, which was X. So Sam is correct. Okay. So please let me know what questions you have on this, and we'll work on this tomorrow.